It's Wednesday, May the 2nd. Lake level is still about the same as it's been the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's right about 9:15. Water temperature is kind of all over the place, but it's just about, no matter where you go, it's at least 60 degrees. You know, first thing in the morning, and like I say, later in the day, especially if you're around the more stained water, you'll find mid to high 60s. Fish are in a full-blown spawn. Just last couple days, it seems like with that full moon, they've really pulled up. And just about any spawning cove you can go into and see cruising fish, see a lot of fish on beds. I'm seeing a lot of fry. It's telling me that, you know, a lot of fish have already spawned out, but still catching some fish back out off the point that don't look like they've spawned yet. So, I mean, we've still got about another 2-3 weeks of the spawn. I think it'll go clear to the end of May. There's a little bit of a shad spawn starting to happen. So in the morning, there's been a bunch of shad up shallow in certain areas and some over some deeper trees. There's some fish feeding on them. But there's been, you know, just a ton of different ways to catch fish. And just in the last few days, this past weekend, you know, 13, 14 pounds is what it was taking to win or do real well in the tournaments. And then we had a tournament Tuesday, a benefit tournament, and it took 15 pounds, didn't even get a check. So it was unbelievable how much it changed in just a couple days. There's been some really, really good fish starting to show up. But, you know, I'm catching them a lot of different ways, and one fun way I've been catching them is throwing a floating worm. And you can rig it up on a bait caster or a spinning rod. But I like to use a Lew's 7-foot medium action fast tip on this setup. And normally what I do is I put a swivel up about 16 inches from the hook. And I just use a 2 or a 3/0 hook. And it's, you know, 3 colors that I'll usually throw. This is a methylate. I also throw a bubblegum or a white. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of fishing it in the blind, but most of these fish are coming off of beds. And I'm fishing a fluke the same way. Same exact rig, and just using a fluke. If the water's got a lot of stain to it, I'll use a white. If it's clear, I'll use something that's got a little bit more shad color to it. Another bait that's working real good up shallow. And yesterday the sun was out, and I caught fish all day long on a topwater. One of my favorite baits to throw this time of year is a Strike King Sexy Dog. And the reason for that, it's a slow-moving bait. It's a walking bait. And I can work it side to side without moving the bait too far at one time, and it really seems to aggravate the fish, you know, when they're on the beds. And I'm not actually seeing these fish on the beds. I'm making long casts, kind of parallel on the bank. Another bait that'll work good, it kind of does the same thing as a pawpaw. This is a Yellow Magic. Instead of walking the bait, you can pop it and let it set. Pop it and let it set. Like I said, it just irritates them fish that are on top of the beds. And then the old standby is either a jointed redfin. This one here is a Storm makes this. It's a jointed thunderstick. But Cotton Cordell also makes one that's a jointed redfin that'll work real good. If you notice, I've got pretty much white or bone color. That seems to be what's working the best for me. There's some fish being caught on Carolina rigs. You can fish split shots. Ned rig is catching quite a few fish. Now, you don't have to fish very deep. For the most part, I'm setting about 12 to 15 foot of water. And a lot of the fish that you're catching on a Ned rig and a split shot, I believe these fish are on beds. You just can't see them. You dragging the bait over their beds. They're picking it up, you know, to move it. It's a real subtle bite, but you can catch a lot of fish. In the topwater bite, like I say, there's a shad spawn going on. So if you could find an area that's got a lot of bait fish in it, you're apt to have a good swim bait bite. The swim bait is still working good. I would start upsizing my swim baits instead of like the 2.8 Kitech and a little 4 or 5 inch grub. I'd start going to like a 3.4 or up to a 4-inch and throw it on either a 3/8 or a half-ounce head. Now that these fish some of them are getting done spawning, their appetite's going to get a little bigger, and they'll go for bigger baits. Now, I don't know if there's any one certain area of the lake. I've kind of been all over, but the moss is getting better. If you've been down here fishing, it's still pretty bad down by the dam up towards Kimberling, but it's getting better around Kimberling every day. There's more and more of it breaking up. The upper White River, like Baxter to Campbell Point and on up, having very little trouble fishing the bottom with the moss. In the same way from like Joe Bald area or Point 9 on up to James. If you get up around Timber, rub up against it, you'll get some moss and some brush, but for the most part, it's pretty clean in that area. From Kimberling to the dam over to about the 86 bridge seems to be the worst, but with this water temperature warming up, that moss is breaking loose, the lake's turning over, so there's more of it just floating around, and hopefully in another week the majority of that will be gone. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.